So this is me getting my board ready. I'm going to go through, it's a bit about 15-minute video, I'm going to go through how I did this portrait. Here I am slapping on some acrylic paint as an underpainting. Usually we use diluted oil paint with terps, which dries fairly quickly. But I'm using acrylic today, I've been experimenting with that, quite enjoying it. It dries really quickly, and you can put lots of layers. I have done underpaintings with white acrylic on the palette, and then you opaque straight away, which gives a sort of different underpainting. You can almost get a lot of the flesh tones. Oh, don't do that. Sorry, it's a cat bashing the microphone. You can get a lot of the actual colours that you want in the final painting, and then you can show through when you start putting the oil paints on, which can be quite nice, particularly like that with landscapes, putting down a kind of dirty green, blocking in getting a lot of the orangey dirty greens that you see on the downs here. Anyway, here I'm scrubbing out, so I'm just doing a drawing basically. I'm scrubbing out the highlights, creating a sense of the form, getting everything in the right place. And that's what I'm trying to do here, really. I think the eyes are too low, aren't they? Big forehead, look. Watch that there, scrub them out, go on, get rid of them. Got them in the right place. Well, like, funny little eyeballs, get rid of them. A bit off-putting. I'm nearly getting to the point where I'm happy with the placement of everything. And I'm ready to start putting oil paint on. I think I'll start with the lights, which aren't quite as light as they appear in the video, but they were quite bright. And you can see how grey some of those flesh tones are. And that's it looks especially like that because the background's still very red and the hair's red. So you have to be careful of that. I'm going to show you a little. There you go. Look at that. A and B are actually the same tone, same lightness, same darkness, A and B. But the brain tells you they're not. So the brain's always playing tricks. So I'm putting in the background here, which helps to key everything in. From now on, it's just a question of refining, really. I've got the main. So if you to look at that with your squinting and from a distance, you'd know it was a face, and you'd know that it was a head, and that it had a form. Hair looks a bit flat because I haven't done much to that, but the actual head has a kind of form to it. And then from this point on, it's really just honing the details, constantly adjusting, checking, looking, checking the drawing. So what that means is it's quite mathematical, really, in the sense you're just looking for relationships between points. How far is that from there? How far is that from there? A little trick that comes naturally perhaps to some people and maybe not so naturally to others. You sort of have to abstract the shape. So say if I'm looking at the shape that the nose forms with the eye, so picture the nose, picture that right eye, that's a kind of upside down capital L shape. You sort of abstract that shape, and might even become a creature or an expression in itself, and that somehow gives the brain a way of coding it so that you almost get an emotion from that shape. And then as you look back at the reference or the sitter, you're seeing if you get the same emotional response, the same feeling. I've never really thought about it like that before, but that's kind of what it is to me anyway. Shapes have a sort of feeling to them. And likewise, brush strokes have a feeling to them. So be aware when you're painting of the mark that you're making, and ask yourself, is it a nice mark? Do I like that mark? How does it make me feel? Because we're not just interested in getting a likeness. We want to create something that's beautiful. So there's no point getting a likeness if every mark is just ugly and fiddly and not coherent. Because then you've got a likeness, but you've just got a group of ugly lines. That sounds a bit mysterious, doesn't it? What is how do you make a beautiful line? Well, it's kind of the movement of it. So just feel like when you're putting on the stroke, put in a nice movement, like a bit like you're dancing with your wrist and your arm. Just just enjoy the actual movement of the mark. So you might have noticed that I was using my thumb at one point, and I was just pushing the colours, blending the edges. I was talking to someone yesterday on the phone, giving them some advice, and the image that they sent over, they were working on a portrait, and every line was so sharp. The brain just doesn't read it as natural. The brain will always read something soft because we do see things out of focus, but we never see that much detail. And I think it was Sargent that talked about over modelling, which is a common mistake. So we exaggerate the difference between the lights and the darks often when we're starting out, and we sharpen everything, we put all these details in, just blur it, soften it, really start with it as soft as possible, and then just add a few little details. Background's quite important. You shouldn't just think of it as a dead space. One of the best portraits I did recently, and one of the reasons I liked it, is because although the background was very simple, had a nice shadow that just seemed to sit the body in the space. I'll maybe stick a photograph up. The background is really important for sitting. It has to give context to the main story. If you're working on something and you get frustrated and you need a bit of help, you can give me a call. Charge £10 for 15 minutes. You can send me some pictures beforehand. Email's probably the best way. I'll have a little look and a little think and just offer you some advice and hopefully get you out of a rut. We're getting there with the likeness now. So that's always a relief when you look back and you think, yeah, that's the same person. That's always a good sign. And he's rather dapper, isn't he, with his smudged mascara and his slightly wonky left eye, which will all be amended in good time. But not yet. I've been trying. No, yeah, I'll mess about with the background a bit more before I sort that out. I added a bit of violet in with the yellow ochre, which gave a nice kind of warm brown. You can't really see that there's violet in there from the video, but there is, and it does give it a slightly different feel to the skin and flesh tones. Continue modelling, continue looking. I think I've popped out to the toilet, but I'll pretend that what I'm actually doing is just stepping back and looking at the painting, because I don't do that enough, and I highly recommend that you have some kind of way of reminding yourself, because it's so easy to just, I'll just look in a minute, I'll step back and have a look in a minute. You just into one little area, and then how often you step back and you go, that whole area is in the wrong place, and you've worked on modelling a form, say what I'm doing here, the eye, and you keep working and you haven't stepped back and you haven't looked at the whole picture, and you see things that you don't see when you're only a metre away. So just keep stepping back and looking, and you just flick your eye from the reference or the sitter back to the canvas. Take a break, take a 5-minute break, and come back and you'll see it differently. So there's a couple of other tricks as well for getting an objective view of what you've been doing. There's a little mirror that I use, and you just look at the painting in the mirror. That's probably the easiest way of doing it. You can take a photograph and look at the thumbnail from a distance, make the photograph small. That's a good way. Often shows you something, or you can just look on your phone. I haven't got a smartphone, so these things don't come naturally to me when I'm talking about photographs. But obviously, most people have a smartphone. and you can just take a photograph on your phone, and if you look at that, you'll see things that you won't see just by looking at the painting directly. So okay, I'm adding some more light to the face here. I think, probably looking back, if I'm looking at the reference now, what I like about the reference is that I think the lower half of his face is kind of in shade. I wouldn't say shadow, but there's definitely a light on his forehead that isn't necessarily on his cheeks, and I'm not sure I really appreciated that. I think the whole cheek I've probably gone too light. Oh, well, I mean, I know I have, but it's kind of, I forgive myself. Why? Because I'm sorry. Forgive me. Thank you. I love you. It's habit really, when most paintings have a kind of even light, and I've probably just not looked. I've painted what I think I see rather than what I see, so you know, we all do it. I also wanted to mention that I'm going to be doing a series of portraits of interesting characters whilst interviewing them, so keep your eye out for that. Mad Mick's going to be the first sitter, and we'll have a long chat and I'll wheedle out some of his secrets. I think people open up quite a lot when you paint them, and it'll be a different kind of interview technique, because I'm not an interviewer. I'm not certainly not a formal interviewer, but it'll be so slow. Not the actual end video won't be so slow. I'm not really selling it, am I? Obviously it'll be edited, but the actual process will be so slow that people will relax, I think, and open up things maybe that they wouldn't in a shorter form interview. I'm really looking forward to that. We'll be starting that next week, hopefully, and putting those out soon. Also, if anyone's interested in me painting them or a member of their family, that's what I do. So drop me a line and we can talk about how one commissions a portrait. I think I'll have out a video by the time this one comes out. If I haven't, I will have soon, and that will just be a quick one running through the whole process of commissioning a portrait. Just trying to get those details in. Get the eye to really sit right. The eye's where the focus is really, you have to get the eye right. And you don't want too much detail, but you want the form. All those little folds have to read right. If you're thinking about painting yourself, not painting yourself, this isn't me by the way. If you're thinking about painting yourself, the first lesson, really, pretty much the only lesson, is paint what you see. There's a caveat to that. Once you've painted what you see, then you can paint what you know. But first step is paint what you see. Get rid of what you know or what you think you know. So a classic thing is the whites of the eyes. We call them the whites of the eyes, and we think they're white because they're whiter than the surrounding area, but they're never white, and they're certainly they're never ever white. But they're rarely even whitish. They're usually grey, some kind of grey. Either they're usually a reddy blue, like a purpley sort of grey, off white. But you've got to look really carefully at the whites of the eyes, because you've got to remember that they are affected by the shadows of the forms around them. So they're shaded by the lids, so they do darken as they get into the corner and under the eyelids, and you need to show that. Otherwise they just look flat, like someone's got a bit of paper stuck in the corner of their eye. One thing you can do, if you have access to Photoshop or something on your phone similar, you can actually take your photo that you're copying from and just pick out the colours. In Photoshop there's a colour picker, and you just pick out those colours and it shows you what they are, and it's a bit like the optical illusion trick that I showed earlier. Out of context you put them on a white background or a black background and you'll see them completely differently. But I'll talk more about that, how to see colours more accurately, in another video. Okay, there we have the final painting. I was pretty pleased with it. I think I did darken the cheek in the end. So keep in touch, keep watching, keep being creative. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. All the best.